Hey everyone, welcome to episode 10 of Cool Chords. This week we're going to be taking a look at a very interesting progression from a song by Mr. Bungle entitled Retro Vertigo. Hope you enjoy. Alright, I love this progression. It's got such a dark, ominous sound to it, and a lot of really interesting resolutions within the chords. So you'll have a lot of these chords where you feel like it's going to go to a certain place, and then it just goes somewhere completely different out of left field. Really throws you off, and that's what I love so much about this song, and about Mr. Bungle in general. I mean, just always, keeping me on my toes in terms of, chord progressions and harmony and stuff like that. So what we got here is we're starting with a D minor over A, and this is the first half of the progression. I would say that this is kind of loosely based in the key of D minor, but it's there's kind of a gray area when it comes to the the tonal center of this song. But we start with A, D, and F, middle, ring, and pointer, and we just strum that 4 times. And then it's going to switch to an E dominant 7 over G sharp. So what I do here is I just slide my middle finger down a fret and I slide my pointer finger down a fret like that. So I'm keeping the ring finger but sliding these two down. Alright, so that's the first part of the progression. Times. Okay, so harmonically, what I would say is going on there is if we're going to consider this to be in D minor, we're starting on the 1 chord, and then this E7 chord would be considered the 2 dominant. So if you're unfamiliar with how a 2 dominant chord is typically used, basically, in the minor key, normally the 2 chord would be minor 7 flat 5, but you can make it into a dominant chord, and a lot of people call that the 5 of 5. So if that sounds confusing, think of it like this. A D minor, in the key of D minor, A is your 5 chord, right? A7. So if A is the 5 of D, and we want to think of the 5 of A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that would be E. So E7 is the 5 of A7, A7 is the 5 of D minor. So I know it's a lot of numbers, it might be a little bit confusing, but I would consider that to be a 5 of 5 chord, a secondary dominant. But the thing that's interesting is typically when you're doing a progression that's using chords like that, normally you would see something like D minor, E7, and then it would go to A7. So this is what I'm talking about, where the chords are kind of not resolving in the typical fashion, because rather than going to that A7 chord, he's just going between the D minor and the E7 the entire time, which is really cool. And then if we look at the vocal melody, what's happening there, it's... and that creates really interesting colors on top of the progression. So the vocal melody is A, F, E. So that's over the D minor chord. So that's the 5, the flat 3rd, and then the 9. And then he anticipates the E7 chord by doing this awesome augmented arpeggio. So G sharp, E, and C. So if you look at that against the E7 chord, you're getting the 3rd, the root, and then the sharp 5. So against your E dominant 7 chord, he's got the augmented, right, the sharp 5. So that creates this really interesting color against that chord. And you can actually get those notes together, and it comes into this voicing. So it's like pinky on G sharp, ring finger on C, pointer finger on D, and then open E. So the combination of the chord and the vocal melody creates this, voicing. now this gets really interesting. So now we go to a C, just a regular C chord, and we're going to strum the 4 strings, so the 5th string to the 2nd string, and then you're just going to strum the 3 strings, the 4th string, 3rd string, and 2nd string 3 times. Okay, and then we're going to go to an F sharp bar chord. We're going to strum all 6 strings, and then just strum the top 3 strings, your 3rd, 2nd, and 1st string. So now we have. Okay, and then the last chord we go to an E augmented chord, which is this open 6th string, ring finger on the 7th fret E, middle finger on the 6th fret G sharp, and then bar your pointer finger on C and E on the 3rd and 2nd string, and you strum from the 6th string to the 2nd string. Then you do that. So after you strum all 5 strings, then you do the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string 3 times. And then you're going to keep strumming those strings, but now in the left hand, your pinky is just going to press down on the 7th fret of the 3rd string. So like this. So he's switching from an augmented chord to a dominant chord, which it's actually the same chord we do in the verse right here, but we're coming at it from this augmented chord, so the fingering looks slightly different. So then we have. Okay, so theoretically, what I would say is going on there, another one where there's kind of a gray area in terms of the tonal center, but if we're going to say it's in C major, since that's a chord it's starting on, we have the 1 chord. Now right here, this F sharp major chord, this is an example of another voicing where I was saying before how you might encounter a chord movement like this, but it doesn't resolve typically the way that it does in this song. So normally if you're going to see something like that, you know, some people might go to an F sharp chord as a passing chord to get down to F, you know. Or you go to C major, F sharp, and then B major, right? So that would be if you're treating the F sharp major as like a 5 chord, or the other one as a chromatic passing chord to get down to the F major, to your 4 chord. So obviously he's not doing that at all. He's going to this augmented chord, which that is really the chord in this progression that catches my ear the most, where I'm just like, wow, that's wacky. What's going on there? So if we're going to consider it like that, we have the 1 chord, we go to the sharp 4 major chord, and then it goes to an E augmented, which I guess you would just call it like the 3 augmented chord in the key of E, right? Because E is the 3. But even in that case, normally, like if I was in the key of C major and I saw an E augmented or an E dominant chord, I would expect it to either go to A minor or F major, right? And that's not what he does, because then it just repeats again from the beginning. So you're going from this E augmented chord back to the verse, back to D minor. So it's got all these different little chord movements that resolve in these really unique places, which I love. It really, you know, catches my ear. So the entire progression. All right, so a lot of really good things going on in here between the first progression where you have the D minor to the E7, right? Thinking of it as D minor and then E dominant as like the 5 of 5, but it doesn't resolve to A7, right? It just goes right back to D minor. And then the C major chord going down to the F sharp, which you would normally think of as like either a passing chord going down to F or treat it as the 5 of B. But rather than going to one of those, he resolves it to E augmented, which I don't even know, honestly, if resolve is the right term to use, because it doesn't really sound like it's resolving. It sounds like it's just constantly building tension. And maybe that was his goal when he was writing the progression and writing the melody. And if that was his goal, he definitely accomplished it, because it's a very, you know, dissonant, you know, dark, tensiony sort of song. But one of my favorite all-time Mr. Bungle songs. I love it so much. But Yeah, that's our progression for this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got something out of it. And thanks for watching. I will see you guys at the next video.